Ohio, we would be prepared to help somebody in that case.
Yeah.
Not every state is.
What about the claims of fraud and rooting out fraud? Kansas Republican Roger Marshall, who's a doctor, says at least 25% or even 50% of Medicaid is a fraud. What was your experience?
So, I wouldn't put fraud at that high. Would I say that people make mistakes? Yep. Would I say that there is some waste and abuse in the system and some fraud in the system? Of course there is. But I would look at the vast majority who aren't being fraudulent, who just plain need the program. I can tell you when we did expansion, I had some very difficult conversations in our caucus, obviously Republican caucus, about it. But I had a number of legislators who came to me and said, hey, I represent this very rural part of Ohio, and Medicaid is important because farmers don't have any other source of getting insurance, right? So if we take down Medicaid expansion or we reduce Medicaid, then we need to shore up the private healthcare system because we need to have that be the answer.
It's Barbara Sears Rochon, former director of Ohio's Medicaid program. Barbara, thank you. Here Now is a production of NPR and WBUR. I'm Robin Young in Boston.
And I'm Asma Khalid in Washington, D.C. It's Here Now.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and from the Music Emporium, guitar sellers for more than 50 years, celebrating the enduring presence of music made on the front porch and center stage. You can learn more at themusicemporium.com.
I'm Robin Young. President Trump's efforts to cut the federal government without going through Congress are being challenged in courts across the country. How are judges ruling? And some Republicans are expressing concern about Trump's radical reset with Russia and his stance on Ukraine. Our weekly roundtable next time here and Now.
For selected shorts tonight at 8.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by the Kendall College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Tulsa, helping students transform their passions into fulfilling professions and meaningful lives. More at artsandsciences.utulsa.edu.
Public Radio 89.5. AWCS HD1 Tulsa.
From WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Terry Gross with Fresh Air. Here's why today's guest, Rich Benjamin, was born in the U.S. His grandfather was a popular Haitian labor leader who became Haiti's president in 1957 for only 19 days. He was overthrown by a military coup and was sent to the U.S. During the coup, the president's 13-year-old daughter, who years later became Rich Benjamin's mother, was taken by soldiers and raped. She was eventually reunited with her parents in America. Today we talk with Rich Benjamin about getting access to classified documents revealing the Eisenhower administration's role in the coup, being parented by a successful but traumatized mother, and as a young man, hiding he was Haitian and gay, then coming out during the AIDS epidemic.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The longest-serving Senate party leader in U.S. history, Kentucky U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell, says he is retiring. The Republican's departure at the end of his term next year will cap 40 years in Congress. Today, on his 83rd birthday, McConnell paid tribute to his mother.
I've never lost sight of the fact that without my mother's devoted care, a childhood encounter with polio could have turned out a lot worse.
McConnell still walks with a limp and suffers health problems related to polio. His support for childhood vaccinations put him at odds with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s anti-vaccination advocacy. Earlier this month, McConnell was the sole Republican to join Senate Democrats in opposing Kennedy's confirmation as Health and Human Services Secretary. Kash Patel is the next director of the FBI. He was confirmed today, largely along a party line vote, but two Republicans, being Susan Collins and Alaska's Lisa Murkowski, joined Democrats in voting no. New York Governor Kathy Hochul will not remove New York City Mayor Eric Adams from office, that according to multiple sources with knowledge of the governor's thinking. John Campbell of member station WNYC reports.
State and city law give the governor power to oust the mayor, but Governor Hochul doesn't intend on using that authority, at least not for now. Instead, she'll push bills to rein in the mayor's power and give the state more oversight. Hochul weighed Adams' fate in a series of meetings with city leaders this week. The Trump administration moved to dismiss federal corruption charges against the mayor earlier this month. That led a handful of prosecutors to quit. Two accused the mayor of cooperating with Trump's immigration crackdown in exchange for a dismissal, which the mayor denies. For NPR News, I'm John Campbell in Albany.
The Palestinian militant group Hamas returned the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages today in a ceremony run by mass militants in the south of Gaza. It's the first group of hostage bodies to be handed over under the ceasefire that went into effect January 19th. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports Hamas had a defiant message for the United States.
Hamas gunmen stood on a stage with the 4 coffins of the Israeli hostages draped in black. Behind them, a poster of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as a fanged vampire. A masked militant from the Qassam Brigades, Hamas's military arm, spoke from the stage with a message directed at President Donald Trump. He called Trump's plan to displace Palestinians from Gaza and rebuild the Strip under U.S. ownership nonsense.
What do you think might frighten us? We've made very good friends with death lately, equally receiving and delivering it.
Hamas is expected to release 6 live hostages on Saturday. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Jericho.
From Washington, this is NPR News. As the Trump administration works to shrink federal government spending, on Air Force One today, the president shared his vision for the District of Columbia.
We should govern D.C. I think the federal government should take over the governance of D.C. and run it really, really firmly. And I like the mayor. I get along great with the mayor. But they're not doing the job.
Mayor Muriel Bowser noted D.C. home rule is not up to the White House.
It's a congressional issue. Home rule is done by act of Congress, and it is in the hands of the Congress.
This hour, President Trump's holding a White House event marking Black History Month. The former head of the Spanish Soccer Federation has been found guilty of kissing a star player on the field after Spain's victory at the 2023 Women's World Cup final in Sydney. From Seville, Miguel Macias has details.
The video immediately went viral. Luis Rubiales was on the stage where victory medals were being handed out. A few steps away from the Queen of Spain, Rubiales grabbed player Jennifer Hermoso's head and kissed her on the mouth without apparent consent. The moment sparked a kind of Me Too movement in Spain, under the motto "Se acabó, it's over." The saga arrived at its last chapter this week, with Rubiales being found guilty of sexual assault and fined about $11,000. He was also ordered not to go within 200 meters of Hermoso for 1 year. The verdict, however, is bittersweet for Hermoso and the players who testified in court, as Rubiales and his close circle were cleared of the charge of coercion. They were accused of pressuring Hermoso repeatedly to say publicly that the kiss was consensual. Miguel Macias, NPR News, Seville, Spain.
This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, partnering with Justice Link Tulsa, a one-stop hub that connects individuals impacted by the criminal legal system with services such as basic needs, benefits enrollment, and housing. More at justicelinkTulsa.org.
This is listener-supported public radio from the University of Tulsa. Public Radio 89.5, KWGS HD1 Tulsa.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. One night, when my guest Rich Benjamin's mother was staying over at his Brooklyn apartment, he awoke to her screaming, "Please don't kill me! Please don't kill me!" She was having a nightmare. Here's the backstory. Her father, Rich Benjamin's grandfather, was appointed president of Haiti by a temporary government in 1957. But 19 days after taking office, he was overthrown by a military coup. Soldiers with submachine guns stormed into a cabinet meeting, took him away, and gave him a letter of resignation to sign. His wife was also kidnapped by soldiers. They were both ejected and sent to the U.S. Soldiers also came for the president's children, including Benjamin's mother, who was 13 at the time. The children were taken to barracks where his mother was raped. She never got over the terror of that day. Through her aunt's negotiations with the military government, she was able to get out of confinement and go to New York, where she was reunited with her parents. The family never really talked about the coup and the trauma. It wasn't until Benjamin went to Haiti to help after the 2010 earthquake that he decided to do some research to better understand his family and himself. As part of his research, he sued the U.S. State Department to get access to classified documents, which revealed the U.S. played a role in the coup. His new memoir is called Talk to Me, Lessons from a Family Forged by History. It's also about being black, the son of immigrants, and gay. He says he's enjoyed advantage and endured exclusion. Benjamin's first book, published in 2009, is called Searching for Whitopia, an improbable journey to the heart of white America. Rich Benjamin, welcome to Fresh Air. What did you learn about the Eisenhower administration's role in overthrowing your grandfather's presidency?
Terry, first of all, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you.
Thank you. What I learned in writing this book is that executives of American corporations, after my grandfather assumed Haiti's presidency, called the White House directly to ask them to intervene. In those phone conversations, they called him a rabble-rouser. They said he wasn't fit to be president. And I think a lot of their gripe was he had been a labor leader on the ground. And also, what was fascinating is looking at the national security meeting held at 8 a.m. in the White House, the day after my grandfather was inaugurated. Eisenhower was there. Dulles, the head of the CIA, was there. The other Dulles, his brother, who was Secretary of State, was there. All of the national security team was, and they discussed what to do about this predicament.
So you said your grandfather was a labor leader, but he was more than just a labor leader. He was very popular, very charismatic, and was able to organize mass protests.
He was. My grandfather became a major labor leader in 1946, and he was in charge of unions that represented factory workers, that represented the farmhands who plowed the fields, who cut the sugarcane, bus drivers and hair cutters. And in many cases, Terry, he was able to garner them better wages. And he also represented laborers who worked for Standard Fruit, which was a global corporation, and they weren't too pleased with him in terms of his ability to get them better wages and better working conditions. And he became a popular labor leader through his voice. He had this beautiful command of Creole, the native tongue, and he would give these beautiful speeches, these fiery labor speeches that really aroused people's passion. It galvanized them politically, and for that, he became known, and he kind of came under the surveillance of U.S. operatives in Port-au-Prince.
So, what role did the Eisenhower administration play in the coup?
The role that the Eisenhower administration played was, first, they were aware that the coup would happen. We know this through secret CIA cables. But also, they granted this couple, without the couple's request.
The couple being your grandparents?
Yes. They granted them visas to enter the United States without the couple's request. And so, they knew that it was going to happen. And so, that's critical in their hatching the coup. because they know this man is going to be deposed. They know he's the legitimate leader of Haiti, and yet they're granting him visas to facilitate his being kidnapped and ejected.
After your grandfather was overthrown by the military coup, Duvalier was elected president, and he had what some people consider as a kind of reign of terror. He became a dictator. His police really cracked down on any kind of dissent. And he was president for how many years?
It was very swift, his dictatorship. Once he kidnapped my grandfather, it was barely 2 weeks before he sent the military into the city's capital, and he mowed people down through submachine guns. He killed people. So he wanted to squash the dissent by violence and by murder immediately. And subsequently, he ruled from 1957 to 1971. And then, as you point out, Terry, it was a reign of terror. He broke the press, he broke academics, he broke his opponents, and he became a dictator for life through sheer violence.
Yeah, he declared himself president for life.
He did.
So let's talk about your mother a little bit. So she was kidnapped by the soldiers and taken to barracks. She was raped there. How much did she talk to you about that? That night when she woke up screaming, "Don't kill me," did you already know the story that she was raped?
No, I did not.
When did she tell you? How did you find out?
I found out subsequently through a different visit to Brooklyn when we talked about it. But the main thrust of this story and the main discovery of this story is just growing up, I had no idea, period, about what went on in Haiti. I had no idea about this man's rule. I had no idea about what her childhood was like in Port-au-Prince. I had no idea what her life was like as an immigrant to New York. And technically, she's not an immigrant, by the way. She's a refugee. You've been expelled. You're a refugee, not an immigrant. So none of this I knew growing up.
So she told you eventually that when she told her father, the former president of Haiti, that she was raped by the soldiers, he didn't believe her. And that created an anger that never left her. And also, although he may have been a man of the people, he wasn't a family man, and she felt betrayed by that too. She was asked to lead your grandfather's funeral procession in Haiti. He had moved to Haiti just months before he died. And this was, what year was that?
1986.
Yeah. So she was asked to lead his funeral procession, and she had really mixed feelings about it because she was still angry with him. And I'm thinking, like, what a position to be in. Like, you're the daughter of a president who was beloved by workers who were challenging the elite, and he's still celebrated by people who were alive then. And you don't really want to do it, but you have to do it. Do you have any insights into how she felt when she was actually leading the funeral procession?
The insight I do have is, as human beings, we expect our parents to protect us. And in his case, he failed miserably. He failed miserably to protect her from the emotional harm. He failed to protect her from the physical harm and the violence. And he was in a sort of denial and disbelief and anger at what had happened to her. And this was never resolved, in my opinion. And so, as you point out, once he's finally able to return to Haiti in 1986, she's put in the difficult, ironic position as his eldest daughter to lead the funeral procession for him. So we can imagine what a complicated position that is, because on the one hand, your father has died, you're attending his funeral, but on the other hand, you're asked to mourn a deadbeat who had left your mother and you for a younger woman, and throughout his whole life had failed to protect her from violence.
Including his own, because he beat her.
Including his own. And Terry, I want to return to this other point you made of his being popular and beloved, but that's outside his house doors and less popular and cruel inside his house doors. To this day, he's still beloved. To this day, you can go to Haiti and find older Haitians who will say, I remember this man, I remember what he did for my family. And to this day, you can meet Haitians in Boston, in Washington, in New York, who say, this was a beloved hero who I looked up to. I was at a book signing at a New York public library. A woman came up to me and she said, my name is Danielle. And when my mother was pregnant, she was cheering and a vocal fan of your grandfather, Daniel Fignolet. And therefore my name became Danielle. This woman is still in Brooklyn. And so he was this beloved, popular figure outside his home. But inside his home, he was a bit of a monster and a ghost.
When you went to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, you went to a high school that was named after your grandfather. And I should add here that there was a period after he was overthrown when you weren't allowed to print his name.
Yes. Duvalier made it a crime to speak that man's name, to print his name, or to reproduce his image. And that's what happens in autocracies. They were fierce, fierce rivals. But Terry, when I did return to Haiti in 2010 on this discovery to do this research, I had no idea that there was a high school named after my grandfather, Daniel Fignolet. And what a surprise. So I couldn't help myself. I went to visit that high school and see what it was like. Sadly, that high school had suffered devastating casualties after the 2010 earthquake. So at one point, it was a very prestigious high school. It was considered one of the best public high schools in Haiti. But once the earthquake struck, it was reduced to kind of rubble. And there I was myself to visit the high school, to visit with the students, and to see what it was like. And it was devastating.
Well, we have to take a short break here, so let me reintroduce you. If you're just joining us, my guest is Rich Benjamin. He's the author of the new book, Talk to Me. We'll be right back after a short break. This is Fresh Air.
Tulsa Ballet will present a world premiere, Alice in Wonderland, a new adaptation of Lewis Carroll's beloved classic, choreographed by Kenneth Tyndall, with an all-star production team including two-time Tony Award-winning designer Christopher Orr, British composer Alexandra Harwood, and British librettist Nell Denton. Performance dates are Thursday, February 27th through Sunday, March 2nd at the Tulsa Performing Arts Center. Information at tulsaballet.org.
This is Fresh Air. Let's get back to my interview with Rich Benjamin. His maternal grandfather was a labor leader in Haiti who was appointed president by a provisional government in 1957, but was overthrown by a military coup after 19 days in office. Benjamin's mother, who was 13 at the time, was forced by soldiers to go to barracks where she was raped. She was later reunited with her parents in New York, where Benjamin was born and continues to live. His new memoir is called Talk to Me. Tell us what your mother taught you about education and how it should make you uncomfortable.
My mother taught me that education is not meant to be safe, and she meant this in a double-braided sense. Education is not meant to make you feel safe, and once you are educated, you are meant to make others feel unsafe. In other words, power is knowledge, and you don't just use education idly, you use education to make the world a better place. But we never believed in safe spaces. Education wasn't safe for her father. Education wasn't safe for her. And education wasn't meant to be safe for me. In other words...
Why wasn't it safe for them?
Oh my goodness. My education was not safe for my grandfather because when he became a professor, he was a vocal critic against various regimes. And he was such a vocal critic against one of the regimes, the Lescaut regime at the time, that he was fired for his teaching. He was fired for being a pro-black, pro-working class professor. And so education wasn't safe for him in that sense. And education wasn't meant to be safe for me in the sense that I was always encouraged to get out of my comfort zone, to learn things that might make me uncomfortable, to learn things that might make me unsafe about other ideas, about other people, about other culture. But then I wasn't just meant to, make money simply off that education. I was meant to make others feel unsafe and uncomfortable with that education by being a learned citizen.
What do you mean by that?
Well, by that I mean you don't sleepwalk through the current moment. You don't sleepwalk through current affairs. You don't accept the narratives that your government is telling you about how things should be. You speak out. You teach others. That's what I mean by that. And frankly, Terry, now it's a very good lesson to have had in these days.
You became an activist. You worked for the think tank Timos for a while, progressive think tank.
I did. I worked for a progressive think tank that was deeply devoted to democracy form, that was deeply devoted so that more voters can vote. It was deeply devoted to improving voter access by all kinds of means. And then it was also devoted to economic opportunity. What can we do in this society so that there's not these vast disparities of wealth inequality? The minimum wage being the most obvious example. And when I speak out, Terry, another example was from 2008 to 2014, I used to be a regular commentator on Fox News on the calculation that that network had a sliver of its audience that was reasonable, fair-minded, and persuadable. So I would go on Fox News to talk about everything from sensible regulation on Wall Street, police brutality, raising the federal minimum wage, immigrant rights, you name it. And so these are examples of using an education to be useful in the world.
I'm just curious, I don't want to get too caught up in this, but did you feel like you were being effective, that you were reaching a sliver of Fox's audience?
I did. And the measurement of that, Terry, was the emails I would receive. Sometimes, and I shouldn't even say sometimes, often I would receive emails from Fox viewers who said, "Hey, I hadn't thought of that. You made me think of this issue in a different way." And if I'm frank, I once got a handwritten note from a Fox News host who said, "Thank you for presenting the issues in a way that I respect, even if I may not always agree with you, and that my viewers can respect." And by the way, that happened to be Neil Cavuto. So I did always try to use my voice in a productive way. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes I do better.
Did you get a lot of hate mail?
Oh, Terry, the hate mail. Where do I begin? And often, Terry, I would measure my success by the heat and the volume of the hate mail. So oftentimes, if I felt that I bested Bill O'Reilly in a debate in his prime time, my social, my inbox would blow up. And you could summarize that vitriol in a couple words. It's always like, and I knew that the media appearance and my words had been successful to the extent that it got under people's skin. So the response was often vitriolic. And to me, that didn't faze me. Oftentimes I could get such a vitriolic response and then sleep like a lamb.
What did your mother, growing up in America after the age of 13, tell you about race in America and about colorism? And I ask about colorism in part because your grandfather, one of his goals was to help lead in opposition to the mulatto elite, and mulatto was the word used in Haiti. So if you had whiteness in your background, you were more likely to be in the elite. So what does she teach you about race and colorism?
My mother taught me some very profound and useful lessons about race. And that is that I was not to be defined by my skin color, and I was not to allow others to define me by my skin color. And she always had this wonderful, sometimes unspoken lesson for me is, as a black person, Richard, you don't pick a fight because of your skin color, but you also don't run from one. And so race is just one aspect of who I am. So both her and her father also thought in terms of class and poverty, and not just colorism. But colorism is a fascinating thing, and it still exists to Haiti to some extent. And as you pointed out, Terry, it's those who look more European from the colonial descendants often had more money and financial advantage in birth. And the dark-skinned masses tend to be the laborers who are working the fields, who are working the factories, who are working as domestics in people's home. And those were the brawn and substance of my grandfather's labor unions.
Let's take another break here. If you're just joining us, my guest is Rich Benjamin, author of the new memoir, Talk to Me. We'll be right back after a short break. I'm Terry Gross, and this is Fresh Air.
Supports WHYY's Fresh Air and its commitment to sharing ideas and encouraging meaningful conversation. Support for NPR comes from the station and from Indiana University, establishing the IU Launch Accelerator for Biosciences to drive healthcare discoveries and train the next generation of innovators. More at go.iu.edu/IULab. And from Eric and Wendy Schmidt, through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org.
What do you suppose it's going to be like if government economic data just goes away?
It's going to be like we've taken that x-ray machine away from a doctor. We're not going to know what's going on in communities.
I'm Kai Rizdal doing economic policy in the dark. We'll have that story for you, the numbers from Wall Street, and the rest of the day's business news, of course, next time on Marketplace.
Tonight at 7 on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Hawley Design, featuring custom furniture by Mark Hawley since 1979, plus a large selection of in-stock modern furnishings for home and office from select international manufacturers at Hawley Design at 7th and Lewis.
Now in HD from the University of Tulsa, Public Radio 89.5, KWGS, HD1, Tulsa.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. Let's get back to my interview with Rich Benjamin. His maternal grandfather was a labor leader in Haiti who was appointed president by a provisional government in 1957, but was overthrown by a military coup after 19 days in office. Benjamin's mother, who was 13 at the time, was kidnapped by soldiers, forced to go to barracks where she was raped. She was later reunited with her parents in New York, where Benjamin was born and continues to live. His new memoir is called Talk to Me, Lessons from a Family Forged by History. Your father was originally from Guinea, in Africa, and while you were in high school, he got a job in Guinea, which he really wanted to take, he really wanted to return. And he was an economist. He took the job, your mother went with him, and you're right, there were virtually like no schools or colleges in Guinea at the time. So you and your siblings stayed behind, and you were, your grandmother moved in to take care of you, and you felt pretty abandoned. Similarly to how your mother felt abandoned by her father. Can you talk about that period and what it was like to know that your mother was in another country while you were still in the U.S.?
Yes. So during those high school years, she was off in Africa, as my father was. And Terry, you think about kind of the yearly rituals that any high school person has. The annual birthdays, the annual homecoming dances, the football games and whatnot. And so they were gone for all of that, and they were gone, albeit helping the world and helping other people's children. They had humanitarian jobs.
Yeah, your mother ran UNICEF programs in several African countries.
She ran UNICEF programs. She ran, and it's a refrain I notice, because my grandfather said Haiti was his one greatest love. And my father said helping other people was also his greatest love. And so it's just a tension in this book about helping other children versus the ones under your roof.
When you were a young man, you didn't want people to know that your mother was from Haiti. And there's a scene in your book early on where you're in a taxi with your then boyfriend, and the cab driver detected a Caribbean accent and asked if you were from Haiti, and you said, no, I'm from New York. And he said, where are you originally from? And you said, New York. And he said, you have a Haitian accent, you have a Haitian face, but you didn't want to tell him you were Haitian. Why not?
My whole life, Haiti has been associated with dread. You know, we remember in the 1980s, the Haitian boat people. We remember the accusations that Haitians bought AIDS to the United States.
Yeah, no, the boat people were people trying to escape Haiti on, like, little makeshift boats heading toward the U.S.
Exactly. But that was a thing when I was growing up. So it was, you know, Haitians with AIDS, Haitian who were boat people. And the other stigma was a kind of condescending pity for Haitians, and perhaps that was the most important. And so my boyfriend in the cab at the time, he said, oh my God, a Haitian nanny raised me. Poor, poor people, but what a resilient people. And I think that was characteristic of many people's attitude at the time, is on the one hand, there's this deep antipathy and anti-Haitianness, but on the other hand, there's a kind of cloying and condescending pity for the country. And so for those reasons, I didn't care to be associated as a quote-unquote Haitian American.
When did you change your mind about that?
Returning from Haiti in 2010, when I could actually visit the place, when I could actually understand through my research, through the CIA files, through my grandfather's life, through my mother's life. That's when I changed my mind about Haiti. I think part of the joy of this book is it's really not a trauma memoir. And I hate that word trauma. It's really about survival. It's really about people stumbling and rising through America. And it's really the ways that my mother is such a resilient survivor. And so those two are linked in my mind, Terry. Learning what resilient survivors my grandfather was and my mother was, that changed my mind about Haiti.
So you went to Wesleyan University, and there you joined the fraternity Delta Kappa Epsilon, which is, I think, the same fraternity that George W. Bush had been in?
Yes,
yeah. So, and this was during a period, which we're probably still in, of like a lot of drinking. And were you out when you were in that fraternity?
No, I was not.
Yeah, because fraternities are so much about big frat parties with lots of beer and even more beer, and it's all about like meeting girls and hooking up with girls. So I'm trying to figure out what that experience was like for you, being gay and being in a fraternity like that.
It's ironic to think about. In looking back, I think I pledged that fraternity for the beer and the more beer. And there were some nice guys in the fraternity, but also there was this atmosphere of secrecy and confidentiality in that fraternity in particular, but all fraternities, and that appealed to me.
So you were hiding being gay and maybe also hiding being Haitian American?
Yes, but fraternities are also, you're not meant to discuss what happens inside the hollow halls of a fraternity. And so it was just another layer of confidentiality and secrets and privacy that really I liked at the time. You know, being a young man. And of course I'm drinking my face off. Of course I'm doing keg stands. of course we're dancing to De La Soul, but it's also that idea and atmosphere of privacy and secrecy that I loved.
Were you still having to perform being somebody who you weren't?
I was. Yes.
What was the performance like?
Well, in fairness to the fraternity, I think looking back, a lot of people were performing. You know, you're a young guy, you're performing. Being a football player, you're performing. Being popular for other people, I'm performing what I'm performing. And so, college is just a life of a lot of performance. Faking it till you make it, and many people just being different people. All that being said, college is also where I and many people, you're most authentic, because they really take the guardrails off and you let loose. You have no parental supervision. And so I formed some really close friendships in college because we're very much ourselves. We're all having our hair down and we're living far from home among each other for the first time.
And everybody's trying out new personalities, trying to figure out who
Yes.
they are away from
Yes.
their parents if they're going to out-of-town college.
Especially, and that's why we're there.
That's right. You wanted to get as far away as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you started going to gay bars, it was during the AIDS epidemic, which is such a difficult time to start your sexual life. You must have been afraid of getting AIDS at the same time you really wanted to have a sex life.
Yes, for me that was also a harrowing aspect of survival, in that anytime I got a cough, anytime I got a scratchy throat, anytime I got a pimple, which I would think was a lesion, I would go into this panic. Do I have HIV? And it was an awful time to come to one's sexuality. And I have to keep perspective, I have to have gratitude, because the generation before me, they were literally going to funerals once a week. They literally lost whole dozens of friendships to the pandemic, and that didn't happen to me. I'm HIV negative, and I was able to really come into my sexuality at the end of it. And now they're drugs anyway, but still, it was not pleasant.
Well, we have to take a short break here, so let me reintroduce you. If you're just joining us, my guest is Rich Benjamin. He's the author of the new book, Talk to Me. We'll be right back after a short break. This is Fresh Air.
Oh, hi, it's me, your friend Meg Wolitzer, host of Selected Shorts. And I want to invite you all to hear stories about pals like us. Join me and a pair of real-life friends, the actors Jane Curtin and Jane Kasmerick.
Join us for Selected Shorts tonight at 8.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Mathnasium, committed to making math fun and building confidence so students can achieve their potential this school year, offering customized math instruction and individual attention to students in grades K through 12. Mathnasium.com. And from Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents.
This is Fresh Air. Let's get back to my interview with Rich Benjamin. His maternal grandfather was a labor leader in Haiti who was appointed president by a provisional government in 1957, but was overthrown by a military coup after 19 days in office. Benjamin's mother, who was 13 at the time, was forced by soldiers to go to barracks where she was raped. She was later reunited with her parents in New York, where Benjamin was born and continues to live. His new memoir is called Talk to Me. When you started going to gay bars, you also started using a lot of cocaine. Did you have an end-of-the-world feeling because of the AIDS epidemic, so party now?
Yes, indeed. You know, when I was young, there was this atmosphere of hedonism and death. There was a sense that I would not live past 40. And so I had this mentality, burn the candle hard at both ends, live fast, die young, in the way you think of James Dean or Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin. So I went at it hard. But also, I was born with a blood disorder called sickle cell anemia. And when I was born, the life expectancy for children with sickle cell anemia, assuming they survived their childhood, was 40 years old. So I grew up not taking life for granted and kind of thinking I'd be dead by 41 anyway. So you might as well enjoy yourself, right?
In that period when you were a young man and going in, using a lot of cocaine, you got arrested because you were very high. You saw a Mercedes and... Go ahead, tell the story.
It was one of these classic gay Manhattan nights on the town. And we'd been in a club called the Roxy that has 3 floors. And I was just in this kind of elusive luster. And I just saw a Mercedes that looked like a spaceship to me at the time in my hallucinatory state. And I remember the dashboard was gleaming. And it looked pretty like a spaceship. And I tried to mount and get in the Mercedes, but its owners were feet away, to my detriment, and they yanked me out of the car, and they proceeded to pound the crap out of me.
Then the police came and took you to the Manhattan Detention Center known as the Tombs. What was the cell like?
And I'll never forget this as long as I live. The cell was tiny, and there were 4 people crammed into the cell. And there was a latrine in the middle of the cell. And I'd never been to a cell like that, so it was especially more stark and jarring. And so it stank like feces. There's empty rolls of toilet paper. And there I was in the middle of the cell. And I remember there was plaster coming off the walls. It was horrible.
Did that experience change your life? Like, how long were you in jail? And did that experience change you in any way?
The funny thing is, it felt like I was in jail for 3 days, but when I documented, because I went back and got the police record, in fact, I was only in jail for 36 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it did change my life. It changed my life. I understood leaving that jail that my life was on the wrong trajectory. And also, at that point in my life, it was just a confluence of forces that really shook me up and made me put my life back on track. And that was my twin sister gave birth to her firstborn, and my best friend gave birth to her firstborn, and I became the godfather of both children. And to me, that was a deep, profound spiritual blessing. And it told me it's one thing if I was going to ruin my own life and set that off course, but I wasn't going to do that to godchildren. And so I got on the straight and narrow, and since then,